Dawn, what did Dr. Emerman say about this when we had him come down and do the study?
I'll let him.
Dr. Emerman, you could tell us what you thought.
I'm sorry, tell me what your question is.
When you came here to Island Green, what did you think about the possibility of flooding? What was your finding? You're the expert on that kind of thing. So what was your general finding?
Okay, well, I'll tell you a couple of things, and you can ask me if you want me to be more specific. Okay. I mean, the first thing, which was kind of an inescapable observation, is that the stormwater drainage in Island Green and the surrounding areas is totally haphazard. Okay, you can have a single block, and one neighbor has their stormwater draining to the north, another has a drain to the south, another doesn't have it draining at all. Well, many people can't tell you which way the stormwater is supposed to drain, and as a consequence, the stormwater actually hardly drains at all. It had rained on a Thursday. I believe I left on a Wednesday, and a week later, water had still not gone down in the stormwater ditches, so really nothing was draining. And you have to kind of think about how astounding this is from the standpoint of a stormwater consultant. I mean, this whole idea that we all have to work together to organize drainage goes back to the very earliest civilizations. Ancient Egypt, Sumer, the Indus civilization in India, etc. I mean, that's really kind of the beginning of government, is the idea that we have to work together on irrigation and drainage. You can't just have everybody draining their own property however they want to. So really, Island Green doesn't drain, and there really isn't any model for how it's supposed to drain or how it's going to react to increased rainfall, etc. Okay, so that any consideration as to how more development, more rainfall is going to affect flooding in Island Green is almost proceeding without any knowledge. Okay, there's really no knowledge of how water moves in Island Green, or how it's supposed to move, or any model for how it's going to move. So you've got a very dangerous situation of accelerating development on the basis of no knowledge. Okay, I guess with that, I'll wait and see if anyone has a more specific question.
This is Tom Roth, Oregon County Stormwater. I just have a question: is when they when you came out there, did they send you any of the reports of the stormwater modeling that they did for the new developments out here, or did they send you any of the studies that was done prior?
Well, I don't know what you might have that I haven't seen, okay? The only thing that I've seen are plans, that is drawings, but not calculations, not models, not something that shows the impact of a 100-year or a 500-year storm, okay? Hopefully there's reports that I haven't seen, okay, but mostly I've only seen plans and drawings.
Yeah, no. For all the new developments, they've had, except for the ones that they haven't done yet, but the ones that they're currently working on, all have there's a stormwater model, and then there's also a model that was done through Bay Road, the Bay Road project, that actually shows the drainage coming from Cameron Village through the Heron Lake and into the headwaters of Peach Creek, where we're saying that gives the elevations and shows the drainage part of that. The only part that we don't have drainage models for is the older parts of the subdivision here, because when they were built, there weren't any stormwater requirements. But for the newer areas, there are. And so for the areas that they're developing, they've got a map for these new developments off the golf course that was recently rezoned, that they're currently working on. They do have a stormwater model for that, showing, and our requirements are that they model the 2 to 10, 25, and 100-year events. So those we do have.
Okay, well, I definitely would like to see these reports, but I'm going to be very curious about what constitutes a stormwater model for Island Green, how this was created, where's the data behind it. I'm going to be very curious about that.
Well, so again, it goes back to the original development of Island Green. I can't tell you all the different subdivisions that are in here, but anything that was built prior to 2000 wasn't required, or the county doesn't have, wasn't required to have a drainage model or a drainage plan. DHEC would have required it if it was built after 87, if I'm correct, when their regulations went into effect, but the county's regulations went into effect in 2000. So we would have had them model both their drainage, and we required a downstream model as well to determine what effects they'll have downstream from their development or anything that's in this area. So any that would have that they would be, if they were tying into, so some of these areas that they're tying into right across the street, those two new smaller strips that they did, they tie into the drainage on Sanihana. That's why they kind of upgraded the piping in that area. That they modeled, and they modeled that piping that they're tying into, but nobody's modeled the upper ends of Sanihana or some of those other areas. I think the drainage, the area you live in, it's in the Island Green South was done by BBC, and that was because it was built after our requirements. So that also has a model showing water that's coming to it and where the water's going out of it. So there are studies, there is data that's there, but what there isn't data other than just, and I'm not even sure there is even an as-built for the older sections of Island Green. I think most of that is just because it was prior to the regulations being in effect. But anything afterwards, there is information.
Oh, okay. Well, I would like to see these reports. Okay. I mean, definitely models need to be kept up to date. They need to be based on accurate data. They need to be validated. They need to be calibrated. You need to make decisions based upon very accurate models. How accurate the models need to be depend upon what are the consequences of being wrong. Okay, so we're talking about a situation where the consequences of being wrong seem to be very severe, in which case I would expect to see a very high quality model, very accurate data, very good documentation of how it was validated, how it was calibrated.
Yeah, most of the models done here are done with ICPR, and that's pretty much where all the models were performed in ICPR.
Okay, I'm very familiar with ICPR, so the issue is not usually the use of ICPR. It's the quality of the input data, and it's the way that the final output was verified, was validated.
Which goes back to the engineer of record.
Well, okay, it's not good enough just to say that there's an engineer of record. Okay. How should I request these reports from you?
You can FOIA them. I'll get through Kathy and email.
Okay. You have my email.
Okay.
And I have yours, Dr. Emerman.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, something you said, not Dr. Emerman, while you were getting your explanation, you said something about if it was after 2000, then then the county was doing the studies.
We didn't have a stormwater program prior.
Okay, so these homes that were built across the way here that didn't have a stormwater.
They do have a stormwater. That was a different. Yeah. So that was another conversation I was going to have. Their water is not supposed to come this way. and I will have that, we'll get that rectified.
Okay, yeah, because she's, you know,
Yeah, no, we'll get that rectified.
yeah,
I'll have, because that water is, that water is supposed to be contained on it.
right.
So there's an issue going on, and we'll have to look at the plans and then, see what the issue is. But I'll have some economic data over that.
Yeah, because that's a big thing. And I know that we're in the same division, weirdly. I'm not sure how that works. I would think that this is a separate division because we were 5 years older than them. And it goes around to other HOAs, but HOAs are beyond my understanding. So,
The
yeah,
stormwater system is separate.
it is. Okay, so it shouldn't be coming down that way and then into,
Definitely not
Into-
through. Yeah, if it's coming this way, which some of it would be coming this way, but it would not be necessarily overlay. It's running it through somebody else's yard.
yeah, no, I figured that one out. And I don't know much about this sort of thing.
Dr. Emerman, could you explain the area behind my home a little bit, exactly what you've seen and what it is?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to make sure I have the names of the streets correctly. The street in front of your home is Blue Tree Lane. Is that correct?
I'm Blue Tree Court, and then I come off of St. George.
Blue Tree Court. I got it. Okay. Oh, it's called St. George Lane.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So Peach Creek flows north across St. George Lane, and it continues to the north. It flows around the eastern side of a nature preserve. And it continues to the north. A bit farther to the north, there's a very large input from groundwater into Peach Creek from multiple springs. So there you have Peach Creek is now in the form of a pond. Okay, so since you have so much input of groundwater at that point, you have a backwater of Peach Creek that formed to the northern side of the preserve and then formally to the northern side of where you live. Okay, in the past, that was a danger of rising water behind your apartment complex. So at some point, I think that was sometime in the 90s, someone dug a channel to channel that water from that backwater of Peach Creek to channel it westward into the wildlife refuge. Okay, so that so how do we describe the channel behind your house? It's a channel for draining a backwater of Peach Creek into the wildlife refuge. Okay, so at the present time, when you have a lot of water coming down Peach Creek, it's going to take that route, take that diversion behind your house. Okay, so that anything that puts more water into Peach Creek then simply increases the possibility of flooding behind your house. Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
What's your address, Ms. Dunton?
My address, 1440 Blue Tree Court.
Postcode?
Blue Tree.
Blue Tree.
It's down where all the flooding happened after,
Yes. Today is the anniversary of Hurricane Florence coming on landfall. And within a week or so, my condo, along with 2 other condo buildings and 20 homes, had 2 to 3 feet of water. I wasn't living here at the time. I didn't find out about the flooding until after I moved in. So the 3 condo buildings here on Blue Tree and the 20 homes at St. George's cul-de-sac, everyone was evacuated. Everyone, their homes flooded.
9 feet? That's what. Yeah. I checked them before.
yeah, it did, cover the bridge here on Belmont was underwater, up as high as the stop sign.
Yeah.
Everything to the west of Peach Creek flooded. and literally Peach Creek comes completely down through Island Green. So everything, I mean, the Waccamaw River rose, Peach Creek rose, so everything to the west of Peach Creek flooded, and that included our homes down here.
In February of 21, that was the exact same thing. It wasn't necessarily a king tide. It was actually, because we were seeing flooding up and down the Waccamaw because of the rainfall that they had in North Carolina came down. The big PD was still at a high level. So when they brought down even more water, we had another flood in this area, and it didn't rain here. It did rain up in North.
So how do we prevent the problem with all the new houses you're going to put in? How do you prevent those people from having any problems or causing any more problems?
Right.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to start watching
That one thing, and I keep going back to that because it's not just the flooding issue. So I keep going back to that there's still only one entrance, and you've already got thousands of people trying to get out that one entrance, and now you want to add more people. Plus, we know that there are some flooding issues.
Right, and are we going to have to watch the weather reports for North Carolina to wonder if we're going to flood? Is that what you're? I mean, if you're saying that this wasn't a king tide, that it was rainstorms that North Carolina had, do we have to watch the North Carolina weather forecast to wonder if we're going to flood at any time? I mean, we fear it now. Once we see water start to rise, we fear this water rising. Believe me.
No,
I know.
And yes, unfortunately, you know, we're getting calls from Duke Energy up in North Carolina that, and again, it has nothing to do with the dams, but they're seeing the flooding first. And they're actually letting us know when they're getting inundated, because within 7 days that water is coming this way. Unfortunately, we get it both from either the Yacht PD River Basin is gigantic. It goes all the way up and touches Virginia. And then you've got the Waccamaw that goes all the way up into North Carolina, up into Lake Waccamaw. When they got their, you know, and that was the weird thing about Florence is, you know, up in North Carolina in two different areas, you have two different drainage basins, or two different parts of our drainage basin. You know, you got Kinston area, you got the White Lake area. They were receiving over 30 some odd inches of rain. And then you got up into North Carolina, up in the western part of North Carolina, they were receiving, you know, this 30 inches of rain, and it's all, we're the bottom of the hill, so it's all coming this way.
So how do we become proactive to avoid further issues with the people that aren't even here yet? They don't know what they're walking into.
I mean, you take away, we have at least 100 acres of trees left here in Island Green. You take away all that, add those homes where they make them higher than everybody else, and then add their drainage. That's more runoff that the existing homes are getting here in Island Green. How can you let that happen?
If you don't mind, this is, and I keep looking, I'm trying to see, I don't see a face off.
I'm the bird. I'm the bird.
I'm David Gilreath. I'm assistant administrator. I'm an engineer by trade. We're talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about everything from water coming from Virginia to a local water going through a canal in my backyard, to some localized drainage things that may be maintenance related. We're talking about roads and access, and there's a lot of things. So if y'all don't mind, I'll try to kind of guide us through to get us all on the same page. Some of the things we may all like to discuss, and some things we may not like to discuss. But if you don't mind, and I'll start from the big picture, and we're kind of just on that. We're at the bottom of roughly about a 19,000 square mile drainage basin that carries water from the Waccamaw, from North Carolina, like Tom mentioned. Also goes all the way into Virginia. It's a very small piece in Virginia, but it goes all the way through Boone, North Carolina. Catches a very small piece of the eastern part of Charlotte, I believe, the Charlotte metropolitan area. It is approximately 3% impervious, I think. We've run some analysis on that. We thought, well, you know, when things get to be more impervious and more sensitive to runoff. So we just kind of looked at that. So over 19,000 square miles, that's still a lot of impervious area, but it's 19,000 square miles. And if you look at the drainage, and I don't have a good map to do that, so I probably shouldn't even show it. If you look at the river swamp that's associated with the Waccamaw and the Great Petey River, it's large, very large. And that's an indication of how much water has come through here historically. The river basins, the rivers typically compared to the river swamp, the width of the river swamp is a mile plus wide in places. And the width of the river may be, at the widest, it's about 300 feet, maybe 600 feet on the Great Petey. So we're talking about massive amounts of water. All of the dams up in North Carolina, while we're talking about that, there is only one flood attenuation dam, flood prevention dam in that system, and it's the Scott Dam. It's near North Wilkesboro, on the western side of Boone, or no, eastern side of Boone, North Carolina. And it's a very small dam. It stages water for flood, but it doesn't have a lot of effect because it's so high up in the basin. Every other, I think there's 5 dams on that road. It's 5 dams on the Yadkin and I forget other names of the other tributary rivers. So all of that water comes this way, and all of those dams are called run-of-river operations. Whatever comes into the lake that's above the dam goes out, goes over the dam. They don't have any way to attenuate or to capture and hold some of that water to mitigate flooding downstream. They're not hydroelectric. There are some hydroelectric dams. The Blewett Falls is the dam that is closest to us. It's just over in North Carolina, above Sheelah. It is at its peak. It had about 140,000 cubic feet per second water coming over during the flood of Florence. For perspective, the Niagara Falls is normal base flow is normally just under 100, about 80 to 90,000 CFS. So it's something on the order of about 50% more, nearly double more, than goes over Niagara on an average day. So it's a lot of water. It's a very dramatic scene if you've seen it. If you go on videos, if you look on YouTube, there's videos of it. So there's nothing that they can do up there. Their facilities were flooded, damaged. Their hydroelectric generating station can only release about 10,000 cubic feet per second through that hydro dam. So we're basically, the hard part of this is we are at the bottom of a drainage basin. We can't do anything about it. We're at the bottom of a large drainage basin that's in a coastal plain that is actually tidal. So y'all know if you go out on the river, it goes it goes the wrong direction half of the day. So there's not a lot we can do with that. But as far as the king tides go, we don't, if water does stage, we get water over the streets in Garden City a couple or 3 times a year. It happens. It's happened historically. It might get worse in the future. We really don't, we don't know how it's going to react in the future, but we do know the tides are rising slightly over the year. So there from a macro scale, from a 50,000 foot level, that's what we're dealing with. We're at the bottom of it. We're at the bottom of the drainage, almost the bottom. Georgetown's technically the bottom, but there's not much difference in elevation. I think these rivers out here are around 3 feet in elevation, 3 feet above sea level. Next to we gotta go up 30.
So that being said, why would you put more houses in the way of that?
Exactly. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so we'll talk about that. Anytime water comes backwards, and let's talk about flooding for a quick second. When water goes backwards, when it comes backwards up the channel, it's Hurricane Florence. It's a major event, or it's not a major event. I think we alluded to a flood, an intense, period of rain over the majority of the basin back in 2020. In February 21, no tropical event. They had a massive, I think they had a week or two, or a week or so. I think they got about 8 inches of rain over a short period of time.
Okay.
That water came this way, and it has to. So we are sensitive to all of that. As far as building more houses, what you're dropping from the 50,000 foot level down to the, let's come down to the 1,000 foot level. We're looking at kind of Island Green and all the other Cameron Village and Myrtle Beach Golf and Yacht. We're starting to look at areas like that, and now we're looking at local drainage issues. So we look for issues. We look for when they design this. And I apologize. I forgot your name. I mentioned to him a moment ago. There are people that would give $1 million to have this. I'm not joking. To have this much relief, because most of this development, with the exception of Blue Tree Court, which is around about an 8 to 9 foot elevation, if I recall. Most of the area, most of Island Green is in the 18 to 19 foot range, which means you've got more than 10 feet of relief that you have immediately adjacent to your development. I'm telling you, if a developer had that inland a mile from here, they would pay a lot of money for that relief because it's so valuable. If you have a drainage issue, the good thing is, if there is truly a drainage issue, I'm not saying it's not, don't misunderstand. If there's a drainage issue, it can be fixed. Now, it may take a massive effort to do that, but most of Horry County, you can't fix it. You've got very limited topography, and you've got to work within a much finer envelope.
Well, you're working with a natural creek too. I mean, Peach Creek is a natural creek.
Yes, ma'am. So you've got a lot of opportunity to fix drainage issues that are here. As far as specific go, I can't speak to water was flowing behind my house because I don't know exactly where all y'all live. I know Tom is more familiar with that. Should we allow more development in this area? The portions of it that are being developed are very close to being immediately, if they're not immediately adjacent to the river, to the bluff. And I think we might be kind of on the side of a bluff, so to speak, here. So from a drainage standpoint, there shouldn't be any difficulty in discharging their water. And I forget the gentleman that's online that was speaking a minute ago. We require our 25-year design storm to be attenuated or to be reduced. The outflow discharge has to be reduced by 20%. So it's far and above what standards were in the past. That's been in place for about 5.
Can you explain to them what you mean by that 20%?
Well, the water that, if you imagine a development that's sitting on this road and the discharge point is over here at this corner, and all of that water comes out here. It's not going multiple places, but at any point, it doesn't matter. Any discharge, the water that flows out of the control structure cannot, they go through a painstaking model to model exactly what's here today before they do anything. And then they find out what the discharge rates are for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events, which are roughly 6 to 10.5 inches or so in range over a 24-hour period. So they figure out what it would be pre-development, and then they look at the post-development discharge has to be reduced by 20%. So if they had 100 cubic feet per second, which is kind of a high number, but if they have 100 cubic feet per second discharging free, then they have to cut that to 80 cubic feet per second. Everything's measured in cubic feet per second in that world. So that reduces that rate, and that's also true for everything that's been built. Not everything, but the things that are being built above currently have to meet that standard. Up until 2017, they had to attenuate, or they had to not exceed the pre and the post development rates. Had to match, or the post development had to be less. It couldn't exceed pre-development rates. So, and then prior to 2000, the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control did those. They maintained those standards, and they did the 210 and the 25. They weren't as concerned about the 100. They have their standards to this day are not as stringent as the county are.
It was just a 250.
That's what I thought, because I used to do some design work we were in back in the day. So, so from a flooding standpoint, from a drainage standpoint, we can separate it. The drainage, those issues, there's probably some things in here that we can coordinate and try to assist y'all on in different manners. I don't know what the systems are in here. I can't speak to that.
I'd like to point out an area that y'all need to look at when you leave here, because when looking out from Kathy's front yard, looking straight ahead towards the refuge at the end of the new homes that have been built at the very back of that new development, up along the border of Island Green and the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge, there is a waterline mark at least 8 foot tall across there that came from Florence. And you can see where the developer back there built the homes up so those homes won't flood. If that should happen again, all the existing homes, like my home in the south, Blue Tree Court, we could go through all that flooding again. All your drainage and everything, it's going to go into the new homes behind me. Their drainage is going to go into the refuge. That was 8 foot high back there. I have a picture of Craig Sasser, the director of the refuge, standing back there, and the water line mark is above his head. But those new homes back there, they got built up higher. You have to think about the existing people who we can't raise our houses, and you're putting more water into the refuge. The refuge is a sponge. It's wetland all up and down Peach Creek. It is wetlands, and you're just. I'm sorry.
So they wanted to build an additional 331 single-family houses and 115 houses, and that would take up the rest of this vacant property. So they had to get a design bond, which is like a variance.
Yeah, we're familiar with that one.
To use one entrance. That was the only issue they had. They had underlying zoning, everything. That was the only thing. So it only goes to planning commission. But technically no public hearing, but chairman at the time did have public hearing.
Yes, we were there.
Okay, so this is what they ended up deciding on, is after 136 lots
Which they've done.
are platted and built. So they've platted them out. They're almost done.
These are all built, some of the ones on that Kelsey Road or whatever are built. The only thing that isn't built is some that they just poured concrete for
their whole campaign. So they're almost done.
Right.
And they won't be able to do any more until they either build or financially guarantee. If you see these 5 things. You want to copy this?
Now, if after they do the road, then they're automatically allowed to put in anything else?
They're allowed to put in the rest. And it's not built, they have to financially guarantee that it will be done.
Oh, so it doesn't have to be done. You have to
It has to be done, but let's.
While I'm alive.
The good thing is, the best thing that could happen is they financially guarantee it. They build the homes, and then somewhere close to the end, they make all the improvements to Sunny Hana, because they won't. We try to delay the improvements until most of the heavy hauling is done. So, but they can go in at the early parts of it and start making the improvements to Sunny Hana, and they're substantial improvements. It'll be basically a brand new 4-lane.
No one entrance,
Who owns Sunny Hannah after it's done?
2.5
But
lanes.
it's, no, is it 4 lanes to,
Now, from what they said
But
at the
it's-
time was
it's all described.
that
Right, so it's a 3-lane cross section from Freewoods to Lily Naz, which is a 16-foot inbound and 211s out, left turn and right.
they, Mhm.
And then from Lily Naz, they will widen it to 33-foot wide all the way to St. Andrews.
For reference, a normal standard road is 24 feet wide. So this is a very wide, road.
And then it'll transition to a 22-foot wide road, which is still probably wider than what is out there.
Oh, yeah, it's one.
But that's up to what today's standards are.
Yeah.
And then they'll provide a 6-foot sidewalk on Sunny Hannah from Lily Naz to Fairwood Lakes Resort and Drive.
Okay.
Who will own Sunny Hannah after it's completed?
So to do these improvements, they're gonna have to clear title. And I remember looking at this back in 2019. And so there's like 100-yard section, I think in the middle past the yard.
Mhm.
The guard shack that is in whatever corporation that built houses in the 90s.
Green Spring, this or that, whoever that just is not.
So they'll have to clear that up. Which is just a lawsuit and doesn't take really too long with them being defunct. And then that's a good place for the Master Association to get involved.
I have a question, and please refresh my memory. I was not on planning commission at the time that this decision was made. But it seems to me the trigger for this was the number of homes, wasn't it, at 137?
At the platting, right. So they platted that many lots, 136.
So at the 138 platting, right?
Right.
That's what, so one of the things that concerns me is I believe the misinformation to the community or that is out there is, well, we just need to stop all development. Well, the problem with that is if you don't meet that 138 platting, this financial support from the developer does not kick in. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If the developed, as it is right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's generally a 2-lane road all the way. I'm not aware of an instance where an ambulance couldn't get to outside of this one. That those are a concern. I can tell you, I have heard Chief Tanner say several times in the past, and we'll ask him, what happens here? He said, we will get to wherever the call's coming from, we will get to you. Now, if it's flooded, if it's Hurricane Florence and there's something disconnected, they're gonna get in a boat and they're gonna come to you, but they're gonna come, now it takes longer, but the flood is from a frequency standpoint, it's a very low risk. The new road, once the improvements are made, are going to be 3 lanes wide, and the minimum, one thing we noticed when we came in, the minimum clear zone for fire code is 20 feet. Doesn't mean your road has to be 20 feet. It could be a 12-foot wide road and 8 feet of shoulder. It just has to be a horizontal distance of 20 feet at a minimum. That's code.
My hope is that by communicating and working together, we can provide some type of relief to this community. From a technical standpoint, I'm not sure what all that entails, but that's why I got to get everybody together. Key residents in this community and key county staff to try and figure it out. And that's what I was hoping we would achieve here at this meeting. And then on down the road, once we start developing solutions, then we can have a follow-up meeting to see where we are.
Well,
That's
you
kinda-
kind of have a little bit of that started because you've been talking to stormwater, right? And so if we could get you to talk to, I'm sorry, Andy.
But it
Doesn't look like him.
it goes to what we were saying before, because I've been dealing with different people in Island Green for years now.
I'm sure.
And I can tell you, I don't know who did the work that you're talking about on Sunny Hannah. I have a feeling, but the reason why it was done is they dug out the outfall, which is the last pipe, because the pipe that comes down Sunnehana, crosses underneath and goes into that ditch that you saw them dig out. Well, years ago when we were in here, we had, there was a sinkhole and we look at it, doing some investigation. And, we came back and we said, you need to dig out the side of Sunnehana. And it never got done until recently, I guess. Or maybe it got respilled back in. So I guess my point is it's better to deal with a multi-group than a single homeowner.
That developer had the right to go in and build 100 homes without any question. They didn't have to go get a design.
You mean they didn't have to go through a rezoning or anything like that?
They didn't have to go through a rezoning. They would have gone through plan reviews, and when they met the county standards, they could have built and never asked a question. We couldn't say for exactly anything out of them. They currently can go build 137 homes, so 37 more homes, and that's the limit. Now, if they go over that, 37.
I mean, they're the same.
At 137, they can go to 137 instead of 100. So we kind of risk 37 homes, and that land is too valuable. At some point, it's going to get developed, and it doesn't matter if it's this developed. Whoever buys this land in the future, that requirement's there. If they do anything else, if they subdivide it one more time, even if they just split it in half, they've got to build that road.
The point is when they operate under the current zoning, they don't request a rezoning. There's not a lot that the council or planning commission can do about it because they're well within their rights to build
Under the current.
if they own it under. So that's and that may be part of the problem that we ran into is that this thing never went to council.
Right.
We never had an opportunity to look over it. It just, all they did was go pull the permits, right? And they started doing
Well, they didn't get the design model.
Yeah.
Compromise.
Excuse me for a minute. Island Green did have another option. We tried to speak to Williamson. We had a peaceful protest at the entrance to our community to let him know that the North American Land Trust organization wanted to speak to him about him donating the land. It didn't matter if it was clear cut, as long as nothing was built. If he donated the land to him, then none of this would be happening right now, and they would take care of the land with not adding any building. So there is another option if it should come up again.
I can tell you this much, okay, is that when they started this development, this first part of that development up in here, when he got an argument with DHECS of this being waters in the US, and they determined right off the bat that was not an argument. This is waters in the US. So that was, I mean, that's not with it. That's not going to happen. If he's going to fill in, he may fill in a little piece here or there so we can do a crossing. With it being waters in the US, that it costs too much.
Are there 404 permits here?
The only permit I think that he was required to get was that crossing, that new bridge crossing. Other than that, I don't think he had to get any other permits. I don't recall if they had a 404 permit on that or not. I don't. Are they
mandatory 404 permits? That's the Clean Water Act, right?
It depends. It all is based on the amount of fill. So if you go over, and it's a small amount, it doesn't fill. Yeah, to fill a wetland. So it all depends on the amount of fill of wetland that you're putting in. It's a small amount. I can't tell off the top of my head what it is, but it's not very much. It's less than half an acre. It's in the 10,000 square foot range. And so if you fill within the wetlands in that part, then you'd be required to get a 404 permit. Other than that, and the only filling that I'm aware of was right around for that bridge.